All right. Hello, everyone. This is your gracious host, Kuhani Mwadilifu, currently representing Paradigm Shift 314. And I'm here with one of the men who I consider a mentor, who I consider a friend, who's taught me everything I need to know in terms of African Americans in the arts, the baddest man on the planet, Dr. Gregory S. Carr, everybody.
What's happening? What's happening, brother? Glad to,
Oh,
glad to be here, man. Thanks for the opportunity.
oh, you welcome. You welcome. Um, tell us tell us your name and where you grew up.
Well, my name is Gregory S. Carr. I grew up in Brentwood, Missouri, suburb of St. Louis, in a small African American neighborhood known as the Evans Place neighborhood that unfortunately at this time no longer exists because it has been a victim of one of the many displacement commercial developments. It is now the location where my neighborhood is or was is the current site of the Brentwood Promenade, a shopping center. But I still go by there and I enjoy seeing my old neighborhood, but I miss my old neighborhood. I do.
Hmm. What's your expertise? What degrees do you have, sir?
Well, my expertise is both in the arts and in history. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in theater. I also have a Master of Fine Arts in theater. And I most recently achieved a Master of Arts in American Studies. And I am currently all but dissertation with the American Studies PhD program. So I'm almost doctor. I'm still striving. So I'm up in there. I'm up in there. But I would say the combination of arts and history is so there's such a great connection between the two, because many people who won't open a history book will go see a play, will watch a television show, or will go see a film. Once they see something on stage, on television, at the movie theater, then they might actually go to the library or go to Google or some other search engine and look up the information and then become educated. So I think those two go hand in hand, very much so.
Hmm. Hmm. So I wonder, could you give us a breakdown on African Americans in films, starting with the blackface performers?
Yes, the phenomenon of blackface performing is very interesting. It started with a man that's known as Thomas Rice, who we now commonly know or colloquially know as Jim Crow. Thomas Rice was a white, I believe he may have been Irish in background, who noticed some of the enslaved Black people on plantations, their dialect, their dances, and their music. And he pretty much, for lack of a better word, stole this art form. We might refer to them now as culture vultures. And he popularized his art form, and it almost exclusively at the beginning of the blackface minstrelsy was dominated by Irish performers. And it was just very, very popular. And in fact, many have stated it is truly the first American theatrical form. Everything else we had before then was imported from Europe or Asia. And shortly, a group called the Ethiopian Minstrels during the time of Frederick Douglass, and another group called the Georgia Minstrels, which were both Black minstrel troops, decided to imitate the imitation of Black people imitating Black folks. And they too put blackface on top of their own blackface. And it's easy for us to criticize right now, to say, oh, that was horrible, how terrible it was. But that was pretty much the only work they had going on. Then you fast forward, then you have Burt Williams and his partner Walker. They also popularized the blackface minstrelsy in the late 1890s and early 1900s. And it was they did this until they actually met some Africans while they were in San Francisco from the kingdom of Dahomey. And I'm not sure which country that is now. I think it's Benin. I think maybe it's Benin. It was Benin, not in the area of Nigeria. And they actually came across some actual Africans, and they were very embarrassed that they had played into the stereotypes of this horrible art form. And they decided from then on, they decided to change their ways. Burt Williams also went on to be one of the highest paid performers on the history of Broadway, making $5,000 a week in 1920, which was basically unheard of for any performer, let alone a black performer. But he continued to perform in blackface in the very popular Ziegfeld Follies with a song that became his signature tune called Nobody. And it kind of really exemplified the whole minstrelsy attitude. But then Burt Williams realized that that was not the way to go. And he moved away from blackface and tried his best at just regular acting. And he was actually a very good actor, but people were so used to seeing him in blackface that they rejected it. And then you got this very strange phenomena again. So we start off with people of European descent painting themselves, their faces black. And then you had a new generation of European bass performers like Al Jolson and the jazz singer painting his face up and being acclaimed. And then you had radio performers pretty much performing these very popular black minstrelsy characters, Amos and Andy. On radio programs, and of course putting on a very affected black dialect. So much they were so popular that in the early 1930s, 1930, 1931, these two gentlemen who had popularized these minstrelsy characters on radio transferred their skills to screen and actually made a couple of movies in blackface as Amos and Andy. So then there's just this long history of performers, everyone from Judy Garland to Bing Crosby to just a number of, and I guess you could probably even say somebody like Robert Downey Jr. In the Vietnam movie. Yeah, Tropic Thunder. I mean, that's all the way up to that. So really, it hasn't stopped, but that's just kind of a brief overview of where it's going.
You know, when I look at the blackface performers, such as Burt Williams, who Booker T. Washington said was probably the greatest Negro entertainer there ever was. I can remember we were in class because, by the way, Dr. Carr is my professor my former professor at Harris Stowe, by the way, and he teaches an African American film course. And I can remember you had us watch a documentary that Henry Louis Gates had made. Mm-hmm. And he talked about the blackface performers in there. And I think it was Pigmeat Markham where he did this, probably the most brilliant pantomime I think I've ever seen, where he's opening jars. He's acting like he knows how to fish. It was better than the great silent film actor Lon Chaney Jr. I mean, Lon Chaney Sr., I should say. And I was like, even though that these roles were very harmful towards the African-American African-American image, these men and these women, most likely, were very consummate. They were probably one of the greatest African-American actors and dancers I think I have ever seen. Classically trained, many of them. Really? Yes. Many of the performers, particularly during the time during the 1930s of the Federal Theater that was sponsored by the Works Progress Association during the Great Depression, they have been trained in Shakespeare and other class, Shakespeare and George Bernard Shaw. I also wanted to add, I called the gentleman Walker. George Walker was
Burt Williams' partner that did the minstrelsy and blackface with them. But yes, but many of them had been trained in Shakespeare and classics,
Really?
even going back to, we talked about the African Company at the African Grove Theater. They were performing Richard III and Othello in 1821. When many black people at that time were enslaved, they were performing Shakespeare and other classical works.
Was Ira Aldridge around during that time? Because I
Ira
remember.
Aldridge was a very young man in the African Company. That was kind of his launching pad before he eventually started performing Shakespeare in Europe, everywhere from Russia to Poland to England. And sadly, he was about to return to the United States and perform Shakespeare because he had done Othello all over Europe and just acclaimed. And I think we mentioned in the class one time, he was so impressive as Othello that one white gentleman in the audience became so incensed when it came to the murder scene of Othello with Desdemona. He rose up out of the audience and struck him with a cane and said, "Take your hands off that white woman, you black beast." I mean, so apparently he must have been very good. But before then, Othello had been almost exclusively played by white men in blackface until Ira Aldridge came along and actually added that sense of Africanness to Othello, which he was. He was a Moor. He was an African of African descent.
You know what's very interesting about that whole thing about Othello? I was on I think I was on the Shakespeare Stuyvesant something website. You know what I'm talking about? Shakespeare Standard, something like this. Shakespeare got an S at the end of it, and they have a whole catalog of, like, if you type in Titus Andronicus, right?
Mm-hmm.
It has a whole database of every single actor who played Titus Andronicus, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when I was looking up who played Othello, and I think this was in the 60s, the 50s or 60s, I had came out and found out that Richard Burton had played Othello in blackface. You could literally look this up right now.
Right. And Sir Laurence Olivier was probably one of the top Othellos. He was the quintessential Othello all the way up until the 60s, when somebody finally had to tell Sir Laurence Olivier, you can't play blackface anymore. He's like, I don't know why. I've been the greatest Othello. Well, we kind of have Paul Robeson and other black actors, Earl Graves and others coming along. Or sorry, Earl Hines coming along and playing Othello. James Earl Jones. So they're actually people of African descent. But he was very offended that he had to stop playing Othello because he didn't see anything wrong with it.
I could see why Laurence Olivier would get offended by that, because I remember when films back in the day, they would have the actor and the director do a little behind the scenes, and that would be the trailer.
Yes,
man. And I love Laurence Olivier, by the way. I love him in Cartoon and Marathon Man. But when he was talking about Othello, and he talked about it with so much pride, where, since I'm playing a general, I have to stand like this and I have to make myself bigger. And I'm like, I'm seeing a master on his craft, but the way he's saying this with so much I'm like, what the
Well, I think it's also kind of like the fact that women weren't really allowed to play female characters in Shakespeare shows till many years later, because most of those roles were all played by men. So I think there's this sort of presumption of white male supremacy to play everything, including, as you know, as we talked about in our film class, in the early days of Hollywood, if there was a part that was an indigenous person, it had to be played by somebody white in red face. If it was an Asian character, it was played by a white person in yellow face. When, black person, and black face, it just went on and on and on. In fact, this last night I was watching the original 1961 version of West Side Story. I still love that version. As problematic as it is with Natalie Wood playing a Puerto Rican Maria. And I just recently learned that Bernardo, George Shakiris, who played Bernardo, wasn't even Latino at all. He was actually French. and he actually I think in the West End production in London when they did West Side Story, he played Riff, the white leader of the not the Sharks. The Sharks were the Puerto Rican, the Jets. So he switched from being the white leader of the Jets to the brown skinned leader of the Puerto Rican Sharks. So Hollywood had no shame about painting a white person to whatever color they could fit. And I think also they were observing miscegenation laws. That I think the studios were very, very conscious of the fact that if there was a romantic scene, for example, like when Tony has to kiss Maria in the 1961 film version, that might have been problematic if they actually had a white person kissing a real Puerto Rican young lady. They may have been afraid of violating some segregation laws, or maybe they were afraid that by portraying this, it was too liberal and it wouldn't play in southern states, because southern states would often boycott anything they perceived as interracial. So the Hollywood studios played right along and into systemic racism in film.
Yeah, they even kind of did that with the great Boris Karloff in The Mummy. Because he was in the original Mummy. Mm-hmm. They didn't want him to have a kiss scene with his so-called leading lady in there, because if you look at Boris Karloff in color, he was very, very dark because he was 25% Indian.
Oh, wow.
So they wouldn't even let him, they wouldn't even let him kiss his leading lady.
Yeah.
Strange.
Just a strange. And the rationale they would try to make for that is even stranger. That's a story for another topic, and maybe even a script. Maybe even a script about that. Just the strangeness of this whole phenomenon of blackface, red face, and yellow face. Maybe that's a script that's waiting to be written, or maybe it's already written itself.
Yeah, that is something to talk about. Like, just how it's like. Go ahead.
And it's still going on now. I mean, you have someone as recent as Scarlett Johansson playing in A Ghost in the Machine, a Japanese anime character. She's not even close to looking or being ethnically Japanese. And I think, what was the other young lady? Emma Stone? I think she was in a movie that was supposedly the character was supposed to be a Asian Pacific Islander from Hawaii, and that she was in the military, but no. But they still allow these things to go on. And it's always amazing to me that these things go under the Hollywood radar, but as soon as you see a person of color in a sci-fi classic like Star Wars, there's this huge, outpouring like, oh my gosh, a Hunger Games. I can't believe, they're making it woke. I can't believe there are no black people out in space. It's like, okay, really? Stop it.
I honestly think that whole thing comes about because I think there's an unwritten rule amongst white nerds that black people are not supposed to exist in the future for some reason.
Or sci-fi or fantasy. We're not allowed there. I wish I did. Well, like I can relate this, Kuhani. I got this very brief story because I'm a storyteller by nature. I am have been a self-professed comic book nerd, probably most of my entire life. I mean, probably since the 4th or 5th grade, and I had a white classmate, friend of mine. We were kind of creative nerds together, and we created these superheroes, which I'm still, trying to do even to this day. Almost 60 years old, I'm still trying to make this thing happen. And I wrote the stories, but he did the artwork. And so one day I decided to add a character to our little pantheon. Our group was collectively known as the Universal Defenders. And so I added a black superhero, and I think I called him Rocket. And I penciled in his face with, lead pencil, kind of shaded it in. And he said, "What's that?" I said, "That's a new character for the Universal Defenders." He goes, he's black. I said, I know, isn't that cool? He goes, no, there's no such thing as black superheroes. And after that, we parted ways. We parted company. I said, yes, there will be black heroes in the universe. That's why it's called Universal Defenders. He said, well, I don't want to participate anymore. I said, okay. So I started doing it on my own. So I started doing the artwork, and then pretty much I just kind of pushed his white characters out and made this group a group of black superheroes.
I have to ask because, for my college years, I would say I basically kind of, spent the majority of my time outside of when I was done with class in your office, hanging
Right.
out with the
Having good conversations, man. Deep conversations.
I stayed in the humanities department, like,
You lived there, brother. You lived there, man.
I might as well. I remember we used to have a recurring joke where I said, I need to have a plaque somewhere around here.
Right.
Now, with the superheroes that you brought up, is it the same superheroes that me and you talked about a while back?
The beginnings of it, the origin, because now I've discovered just through blurting out, if you will, the whole with that portmanteau of being a black nerd, being a blurred. I've just seen how you could create a band of superheroes in different eras. I'm a huge fan of the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. A lot of people are not familiar with that movie, but I am absolutely fascinated by that movie. I'm also fascinated by the whole Watchmen series, which kind of more or less kind of resembles my first group of superheroes. But my goal is to have 3 different groups of black superheroes groups, which you never see. If you see black superheroes, they're probably the sidekick of the white folks, or they're as a cameo. I would say Black Panther is probably the rarity, but even they weren't a band of superheroes. A band of superheroes to me are people who are not related. They're not from the same country, or I mean, they can't be from the same country, but they're separate individual heroes on their own who decided to join forces with a group of other people who are like-minded. And you have never seen any groups like that. There might be some out there underground, but I've never seen them. But I would say that was the beginning of it. But my most recent one, the superheroes of my futurism lore, from Watch Night, coming from the holiday that African Americans celebrate on New Year's Eve, while our ancestors were waiting for the Emancipation Proclamation on December 31st, 1862 to kick in. They were waiting for freedom on January 1st, 1863, when the Emancipation Proclamation was to go into place. I think it was also significant that on that same day, usually the first of the year, is when many of our enslaved ancestors were sold away from their families. So to celebrate a day of freedom on a day of, bondage is very powerful. And so I just decided to set my group of people in my situation in the future. And apparently now, the way things are going politically, maybe a not so distant future. I actually wrote this piece about 11 years ago, which describes a group of black superheroes trying to prevent a despot president from becoming authoritarian, who's trying to pass all these laws along with the Supreme Court and members of the Congress to block people from voting. And in the future, there is no more electoral college, and every single vote is counted and tallied. If there is any opportunity to cast a vote, you actually have to go to Washington, D.C. Of course, you got faster transit at the time, so you can actually go to Washington, D.C. within 10 to 15 minutes and get back where you need to go. But it's very dangerous because the last handful of votes are in the hands of some young black people who need to be escorted to Washington, D.C. because there's an assassination plot out to kill them, because these last votes will actually turn the tide of the election, and this authoritarian president won't get a chance to become authoritarian. So he sends out his hitmen all over the country, and not just only white hitmen. He sends out black and Latino and Asian. So to show you that white supremacy is not only upheld by people of European descent, but can be upheld by people of African American descent, Latino descent, Asian, you name it. So white supremacy is definitely a philosophy and a system that does not necessarily always have a white face to it. Sometimes white supremacy's worst face is a face of color. But that's kind of what my piece is about. Yeah, my piece is about a person who's from this band of black superheroes who are trying to make sure that the selection goes forward, that one among them is a spy for the other side and is basically reporting where they are and, telling and in hopes of gaining some favor. And once they realize, they've done everything they've spoke, like Judas the Black Messiah, they realized they've been used and they were expendable and they were no longer needed. But they were thinking, but if I gave name my group, they called the influentials. But I thought if I gave the influentials over to you, that you would reward me. It's like, no, we just use you. You were just a tool. You're just a pawn in our game. No, we have no use for you. So it's like a Judas, literally like a Judas. He's taken out. But that shows you how some of our people and other people of color who feel like they have proximity to whiteness become the biggest spokespersons for white supremacy. Sometimes even better than white supremacists themselves. I don't want to mention any names. I think there's some black male and female, and not only just black. I mean, they're coming Southeast Asian. There's some Latino. So it's just a bunch of people who are centering themselves with white supremacy, with its proximity to white supremacy and whiteness, thinking they're going to get some trickle down reward from it. It's like, no, you're just being used. And I think that's what I want to exemplify in my story, that these individuals who have positioned themselves find themselves on the wrong end of history.
So I want to ask you this question as well.
Sure.
Now, with these same blackface performers, these vaudeville performers that we talked about that were theatrically trained by the greats, even though that they did propagate, they put on that red lipstick and covered themselves in charcoal.
Yes.
Did these actors kick open doors for the next generation after them?
Without a doubt.
Okay. Could you explain?
Yeah, because without Burt Williams, without George Walker, there is no Red Fox. There is no Bill Cosby. There is no Eddie Murphy. There's no Kevin Hart. There's no Cat Williams. None of them. I mean, I could go on and on and on, about even female, there's no Monique. There's no other great comedic actresses without these great people. And I would throw the great Lincoln Perry in there, who we know colloquially as Stepin Fetchit. Stepin Fetchit, for lack of better words, was the Eddie Murphy of his time, of the 1930s. He was the highest paid actor in Hollywood during the 1930s. He was one of the highest paid actors in Hollywood, and people loved him. But once his time passed for playing the kind of slow, dim-witted and talking slow like this, people started to hate him, and it was very sad because without him being present, without the Hattie McDaniels playing all those mammy roles, because she played a ton of mammy roles before she got to Gone with the Wind. Gone with the Wind wasn't her first mammy role. She played a number of them. If they needed a mammy, they said, okay, just go get Hattie McDaniel. And I love what Hattie McDaniel said once she won the Oscar in 1939 for her role as Mammy in Gone with the Wind. She was highly criticized by her own people, including the NAACP and other people within her community. And when they asked her, you know, why do you keep playing maids? Well, you know, why can't you play something else? She said, honey, I'd rather play a maid than be one like you. And I think I think that puts it all in perspective, you know, because lay people have this whole concept of actors have control over the roles that they get. That's only a recent phenomenon, and that didn't come on until like Sidney Poitier, that you could choose those roles, and even to him a certain extent, only after he moved away from his integrationist roles.
See, you know, I can remember when I sat in. Okay, here's his sister Sakina Raw. I think she made a very interesting comment. She says, "All our greatest tap dancers, i.e., Sammy Davis and Gregory Hines and more."
Yes, yeah, but without these early performers and Sammy Davis Jr. Much as I love, I personally think that what's my guy's name? The actor we see on Living Color, Tommy
Davidson.
Tommy Davidson. I think Tommy Davidson should play Sammy Davis Jr. I think he would make it. I think Tommy Davis could play Sammy Davis Jr. in the same way that Jamie Foxx channeled Ray Charles. I really do. I think he could pull off the dancing, the singing, the acting, because he's that great, you know. But Sammy Davis was a part of the so-called Rat Pack. He was the favorite Negro friend, and during the act, they often said a lot of racist stuff that he laughed it off. And one of the things, and you can tell me this is a lie, but I don't hope you don't get censored. I'm just going to put in quotes. And I'm going to say, this is a quote from Sammy Davis Jr. He would often say, nobody can be more discriminated against me. I'm a one-eyed nigger Jew. And that's something that he said often. And it got a big laugh. And his audiences loved that, his white audiences. But his black audiences did not like it. They thought he was pandering to the white audience and giving them permission to abuse him. And to truth be told, he did get married or wanted to marry the white actress Kim Novak, but they literally put a threat. The mafia put a threat on his life if he tried to marry her.
And you know what's pretty funny about Sammy Davis Jr. in the Rat Pack?
What was that?
Allegedly, some mafia La Cosa Nostra cats came out and said that, what's my man name? It's so many. So one of the Sinatra of the Rat Pack was already connected.
Of course.
So my thing is, with what you're telling me about that, I don't know. I mean, we don't know what my man Sinatra did for Sammy Davis Jr. behind the scenes.
Kept him alive.
That's what it's.
Yeah, they wanted to kill him. They did not like the fact that he was cozied up to Kim Novak, and because she was like this very successful, you know, Hollywood blonde bombshell. It was not. I mean, they love Sammy Davis as long as he tapped and sang and smiled. But as soon as he wanted to marry a white woman, all bets were off. All bets were off. You know,
that's pretty interesting because it seems that. And I'm just saying, like with like when it comes to interracial relationships on film, it's always they're fine with the white man that's having his way with Kerry Washington.
Yeah, that's acceptable.
If it's Idris Elba messing around with Scarlett Johansson, it might be a problem.
Oh, it's still to this day. It's still a problem. Maybe we could call it the Othello syndrome. You know, it's because that was part of Iago's great hatred of Othello, because Othello had this beautiful Italian maiden Desdemona that he couldn't have. And I mean, if you remember, I know because you played him before. You remember one of the opening lines of Othello is. He runs to her father, the senator, and says, "I saw them making the beast with two backs." I think that's called voyeurism, and you're looking in on a newly married couple having sex. So Iago was a little bit of a freak, you know. I mean, because he reported, I saw them. It's like, what are you doing peeking into somebody's bedroom while they're doing, you know, they're a very private place. You saw them doing this. It's like, what? You know, so
And
that's that taboo still. But you're right. You're absolutely right. Even in the Loving versus Virginia landmark case that pretty much made interracial marriage legal and made it, barring it, unconstitutional. It was a black woman of mixed descent and a white man. I don't think they would have changed the law if it would have been a black man and a white woman. I doubt it very seriously.
oh yeah, that black man would have been hung, drawn, and turned into wagon grease.
Mm.
You
And
know?
quietly as it's kept, you know, because I, you know, along my studies over the years in arts and history, I tackled the history of Martin Luther King, the real Martin Luther King, not the icon that we see, you know, that we march out every January, third, you know, Monday of January, and make him say, I have a dream, and then put him away another 365 days. But the real flesh and blood Martin Luther King, who was engaged to a white woman while he was in seminary in Pennsylvania, no doubt. And both sides of the parents said, no, no, no. This will not, say goodbye. Y'all can still be friends. The parents nixed Martin Luther King's interracial. He said, but what better way that we can show Americans? Not this way, not you. You know, his father, Daddy King, said, no, sir, we're not doing that. She told him no. You know, so yeah, it was it's just taboo. It's still, but you're right. I mean, there's this long history of, like, Robert De Niro. I mean, he's had, you know, numerous black female, you know, partners, and even in film and real life. And as you said, with the Tony Goldwyn and the Kerry Washington and Scandal, there's just a parade. It is almost like an accepted condition that if there's going to be an interracial relationship, it has to be a white male with a black female, because that, or something. What was the one Sanaa Lathan was in? Something special. I know it started with something.
Yeah, it was with Blair Underwood and this other white. It was something new. That's what it was called.
Yeah, something new. Yeah, I know it's something. Yeah, something new. But I know when they had, was it Lawrence Fishburne? And oh gosh, very, very fine. Yeah, he was in Othello, but I was thinking there was another movie in which he was in an interracial relationship. I think he was a cop. And I can't, Ellen, I can't think of her last name, but it was a white woman, and it was this horrible kind of like rough kind of relationship. But it just seems like whenever there is a black male, or for lack of better words, jungle fever. You got Wesley Snipes and Anna. What's Anna's last name? Yeah. I'm losing these. I think of the first name, but look how violent that turned out. I mean, the parents, you know, the dad knocked her around. Like, once he found out that, smacked her around and just horrible. But I just have never witnessed that whenever there's a white male and a black. Maybe there's some disappointment and sadness, but never anything that violent. So there is still something visceral about a black man and a white woman in a relationship. I wish I could explain, but I don't. But there's something has been, and it still exists. Denzel even avoided it because apparently in the Pelican Brief, I think according to the book, the two characters had shared a romantic interlude, and Denzel, with all the star power, said, "No, I don't want to do that," because Denzel was very open about, I don't want to do it because I got black female fans. He said, I don't want to, alienate my black female fans. So, and I think Julia Roberts was very disappointed that she couldn't have a love scene with Denzel, but he nixed it. He said, "Nope, not doing it."
We'll get the Denzel in it. We'll get the Denzel in a second, because we studied his filmography. We know stuff is up with that. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
So okay. Can you explain the great Sidney Poitier, the dean of African American artistry, and Could you explain him for us and his so-called controversies that he had with the Black community when he was in his prime?
Yes, the late great Sidney Poitier, one of my personal heroes, started off. I mean, many people don't know that even though he is Black, he is not foundational Black American. He's not African American. He's actually Bahamian. He's from the Bahamas and came to Miami, to the United States, as a young child, and then made his way to New York. He was functionally illiterate when he arrived in New York. I had a chance to see an interview that he did on 60 Minutes, and I think he was working as the dishwasher, and his boss, who owned the restaurant, literally taught him how to read because he could not read because he dropped out of high school at a very young age. And so because he was able to learn how to read, then he was able to audition for parts, got involved with the American Negro Theater, and really kind of took off after that, and then got into a series of movies, Cry Beloved Country, No Escape, and just kind of Blackboard Jungle, just did some really good stuff as a young actor. And until he gets a call to do a play on Broadway, pull him away from film for a while, a play by a new unknown playwright named Lorraine Hansberry called Raisin in the Sun. And then he gets a chance to get back and reclaim his stage roots to great acclaim. And I think it definitely worked for the advantage of the marketing, because who better to get people into the seats than have a bona fide Hollywood star be in this brand new play that was revolutionary at its time, because there were no Black plays, Black dramas to be specific, on Broadway at the time, specifically written by a Black woman. Oh, no, unheard of. And it just made the play go even better. And he was able to reprise his role in the 1961 film version, which was quite controversial because it cut out a lot of Lorraine Hansberry's cultural references and references about Assegai and colonialism, because there's a lot of things that Assegai said that were very anti-colonialism and about revolution happening in Nigeria and what have you. But then he becomes, in the words of film critic Donald Bogle, an integrationist hero. He becomes that one Black guy that all of white America absolutely loves. He's the one he could come home for dinner. In fact, guess who's coming to dinner? Sidney Poitier. He's coming to dinner. Now, if all Negroes were like Sidney Poitier, I would have no problem them marrying my white daughter. It's like, yeah, but it's even Sidney Poitier was playing a role. He really wasn't like that, but that's what people believe. And then he gets involved in a wonderful film called Lilies of the Field, in which plays a character named Homer. Yeah, and so Sidney Poitier really kind of kicks off what we now know as the imaginary Black friend of the IBF, or the magical Negro. And one of those criteria, or some of the criteria of the magical Negro, is there is a white person or white persons, plural, in conflict. There's an issue that they cannot overcome. They cannot get past. Then the magical Negro, or the imaginary Black friend, shows up almost like an obedient servant, solves all of the white people or persons' issues, and then significantly and very subtly drives off into this. I mean, and literally, Sidney Poitier does this in Lilies of the Field, as you were alluding to. He starts saying, "Amen." And what's really ironic about him singing "Amen" is he was lip syncing the entire time. It was the great actor and singer Jester Hairston was actually providing the vocals, who was also with him in Heat of the Night. And he drives off into the sunset while the nuns are singing and clapping. And it was a beautiful film. It was a beautiful moment for America that this Black man could come and get recognized. But even greater, in 1964, when he wins the Oscar, he becomes the first African-American to win Best Actor. Because Dorothy Dandridge had been nominated for Best Actress, but she didn't win. But he was the first African-American to win in that Best actor category. And it just kind of catapulted his career into playing all of these roles where he basically became the favorite black guy. For the love of Ivy, falls in love with a white woman who was blind. Guess who's coming to dinner? They talk about interracial marriage. But it wasn't until he played Virgil Tibbs in a very, very powerful performance in the heat of the night. I love singing Ray Charles, but oh yeah. But it's so funny that this film is one of the most acclaimed films of 1967 and 1968. Rod Steiger wins the Oscar for playing the racist sheriff, Sheriff Gillespie. But ironically, after all this love for Sidney Poitier, he wasn't even nominated for the film. And the film is based on a book. So it was an adaptation from a novel. And one of the most electrifying scenes is when he goes to confront a white suspect there in Sparta, Mississippi. And once this white man in this greenhouse realizes that Virgil Tibbs is implicating him as a suspect, he slaps Virgil Tibbs. I mean, just gives him a hip slap. And in the book, Virgil Tibbs walks away. But in the actual film, Sidney Poitier says, "Oh no, I have to slap him back." And so there was a huge controversy about that. They said, "Well, no, this might not play well in the South." They said, "Well, no, this is a new day." I know when the man wrote the book that he wanted Virgil to kind of turn the other cheek. He said, "But I don't do that." He said, "If he slaps me, I'm gonna slap him back the same way." And from my accounts from many film critics, they said there was a lot of tension on the set when this scene happens because they had never seen a black man slap a white man back. This was just something you had never seen before. So it was a first. It was a first. But after that, Sidney Poitier's star kind of dimmed because he no longer wanted to play those kind of roles. I think he wanted to play more of the Virgil Tibbs roles, but they just weren't available to him.
It was too late at that point. Like,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And also kind of going back to Sidney Poitier with In the Heat of the Night. It was so funny. I can remember I was listening to an interview that Paul Mooney and Dick Gregory had. May they both rest in peace.
Mm-hmm.
Paul Mooney, he could be a clown. He was talking about, man, see, I knew Sidney back in the day, which he does say that in his autobiography that he knew Sidney Poitier. He knew Calvin Lockhart, who we'll bring up pretty soon.
Mm-hmm.
He said, well, when The Heat of the Night came out, man, with them island Negroes, you can't tell them nothing. His arrogance, when that white man slapped Sidney slapped him back like he said he slapped him so hard that white man started crying.
He broke his tears, and I love the physical thing to see. Sidney Poitier straightens his suit like I got you. You better be lucky I just slapped you because if I punch you, you'll be out cold. And he moves and he steps and straightens the tie and walks out. Whenever I show that in my class, my film class, I love that moment. And almost 100% of the students love that moment because they had never seen a moment like that. In fact, it's rarely seen. It's rarely seen in Hollywood. Every now and then you will see it. But you can probably count it on your hand and have some fingers left over. But just at a moment like that, when a black man says, "I'm not going to turn my other cheek. I'm going to slap you back." Maybe Sweetback's Badass Song was probably the first that really took that step in the direction because, Marv Van Peebles, Melvin Van Peebles, rather, Marv's son. He took it to the man. I mean, Sweetback's Badass Song was so powerful. We went too far ahead. Okay. I'll back it up. I'll back the train up.
So this is my thing, right? Because we're both African. We're both seasoned African American thespians who study film and stage, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
When I study the black actors from like back in the day, 1900s, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, it seemed that we knew how to do a bit of everything. We were more versatile than we were back then than we are now. Like, and I'm gonna give a good example. Who was the actress who played on Esther? What was her name? Because she's from here. She's from St.
Oh,
Louis.
LaWanda Page. Oh yeah. Oh, love LaWanda Page.
LaWanda Page. When I was looking up her Wikipedia page, she was a stripper. She was
Yep.
a singer. She
Mm-hmm.
was a
Dancer. Yeah. All that.
comedian.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it when I studied the black actors from back in the day, we I'm not gonna say we took the craft seriously because we always have, but
Mm-hmm.
where did that versatility, like why were we all so versatile back in those days? Can you tell
I
us about that?
Yeah, I think we were more versatile back then because if you couldn't make it as an actor, you had to have something else to back you up. You had to, because if you weren't acting and you didn't get a movie role, you didn't get a Broadway role, you had to sing on somebody's record or have your own solo. So I think it was more entrepreneurial at that time, whereas now you have people who act, you got people who sing, people who dance, and every now and then you have a true triple threat of a person. But I think that was the necessity back then. And I think it was about making money because you had this little thing called vaudeville, and vaudeville made you have to act very well and have good comedic timing and to dance and to sing and do all of those things. So I think it was about making a living. And I think institutions like vaudeville were like small arts institutions. You literally learned how to perform in those places. And once black vaudeville went away, where black people going to learn? Unless you go into the American Negro Theater or the Negro Ensemble Theater, some of these other black theaters that were still kind of in their early stages, there was no place for you to go to learn these things. Maybe
Really?
Caramel House, maybe.
So it was more entrepreneurial, and we all came out of vaudeville. Well, they came all out of vaudeville.
I think so. Yeah, the really great early performers performed on what we call affectionately the Chitlin circuit. And on the Chitlin circuit, you had to do a little bit of everything because maybe one night the comedian didn't make it or they were sick. Okay, you got to go and be the headline and commit. But I ain't done no comedy. Well, you gonna learn tonight. Or maybe they got a chorus line say, hey man, one of the singers hurt their ankle, jump in and with this chorus, so I think it was about learning the entire craft and utilizing everything they had because they knew they were also fighting against segregation. They were also fighting against this sort of black critical kind of attitude because that's personified with the Apollo Theater. If you weren't good at the Apollo Theater, the audience lets you have it. They would boo you up. You know what I'm saying? So you had to be as versatile as you could be. There was no there was no black mediocrity. Black mediocrity was not accepted because black mediocrity doesn't register on the radar. You got to be all these things: dancer, singer, actor, and some of them even wrote too. Like Ossie Davis. Ossie Davis was a great playwright and a great screenwriter.
Yes, he was.
I loved his work. I mean, Pearly Victorious. I mean, they actually did a revival of his play Pearly Victorious on Broadway. I was really shocked that they did that show because it's been more popularized by the musical Pearly, but they actually did the young man that was in Hamilton.
Oh, David Diggs?
No, the other brother. I think he played. He didn't play Hamilton. Maybe he played Burr. I think possibly. Oh gosh, what's that guy's name? I can see his face. But he revived it and actually got nominated for a Tony. It was in the running for best revival of a play. And
really,
yeah. That's gonna drive me crazy. I'm gonna find it, but yeah, but it was a very and even though the source material is a little bit dated. It still played pretty well on Broadway. Leslie Odom Jr. Leslie Odom Jr. Played Pearly Victorious on Broadway in this year's Broadway season. It was very acclaimed. I mean, the critics loved it, and I hope they updated it because it's really kind of way back in the day. But I still think it has its place among, the canon of Black plays. I just think the fact that it was turned into a musical kind of blunted kind of blunted the edges of it, because as long as we can sing these things in a song. And of course, one of the things that I always had, that was one of my bucket list roles, is to play Pearlie Victorious in the musical. They have this song about the racist Captain Kochapi, who hated Pearlie and Ludi Bell and everybody black, but they got this song called "Walk Him Up the Stairs," but we still hope he goes to heaven. Which, of course, I don't think Ossie Davis really liked that. I don't think that he wrote that, but they just had this. I know the song because I actually learned it in my musical theater class as an undergrad, because I wanted to learn some songs from Black musicals or that feature Black musical characters. I learned, and once it's a great song. Walk him up. It's like a gospel. It's like a big gospel number. Walk him up the stairs. I mean, they're talking about saying, please, God, let this Klansman get into heaven. So that seems to be like very much a walking contradiction. So why not walk him down? Like walk him down the stairs, walk his ass down. Yeah.
I even studied Ossie Davis too, because thank God for Spike Lee, because that's the first time that I ever really saw him. And he talked about his origins in Willacoochee, Georgia. And I'm pretty sure that he didn't like what you said, because he was very, he was very militant. Him and
very radical.
Ruby D. I mean, almost said
they were very conscious. I mean, remember, one of Ossie's greatest quotes was eulogizing Malcolm X. He was our Black shining prince. He was our manhood. That's Ossie Davis said that. I mean, I've always thought that was such a powerful statement, and it's true. I mean, I feel that way about Malcolm X. I have always felt that way about him my whole life, because he really was that. He was a prince because he spoke the truth. He was fearless, and you can tell somebody like Malcolm X he genuinely loved his people, and so he was deserving of that. He wasn't deserving of all of the negative publicity that he got after he died, and the ultimate disrespect of the way he died and how he died. So I think that's why he's such a beloved martyr now, because of that.
And what his favorite movie was?
Who, Malcolm X? I don't. What was his favorite movie?
His favorite movie, and I hate the fact that I haven't seen this, but I love this actor for his directing skills. It was Nothing But a Man with the great Ivan Dixon.
Loved Ivan Dixon, man.
And speaking of Sidney Poitier again, both of them was real tight back in the day.
Right, because of Raisin in the Sun, him playing the original Asa guy on Broadway and in the film. Yes.
Ivan Dixon was Sidney Poitier's stunt double in The Defiant Ones.
I did not know that.
Yes, he was.
Get down.
It was. Yeah, it's very interesting, like how Black actors back in those times where they kind of almost, I would like to say, worked together to an extent. Like they knew what it was. They
networked. They stuck together because they knew the system was against them. So they leaned on each other a lot more. I'm not saying we don't do that now, but I think it was much more prevalent back then because Hollywood and America itself segregated against us. So we had to turn to each other for support, for networking, for help. Whereas now we can go outside of our community a little bit more and get that assistance. I don't think it's in the same way, because I think it was more community based or even family, extended family based, because they looked out for each other. Like Lloyd Richards. I mean, Lloyd Richards was just one of those great mentors of not only August Wilson in the last 20, 30 years, but he shepherded Raisin in the Sun to Broadway. and he recommended Sidney to play Walter Lee.
And I tell you who else Lloyd Richards had mentored. And this is for me watching a master class.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one of those master classes that YouTube show, I mean, it's that podcast does?
Yeah, yeah.
Did you know that Lloyd Richards and Douglas Turner Ward had mentored Samuel L. Jackson?
Yeah, yeah. I heard
and
that.
Denzel, that whole lineage that we're gonna get to in a second.
Yeah,
because I can remember because I found Samuel Jackson's masterclass where he teaches acting, and Samuel Jackson said something that was so real, because this is the same thing that I was taught when I was in theater school for 7 years. Samuel Jackson said one thing that Douglas Turner Ward imposed upon me, Lloyd Richards imposed upon me, that whenever you're on stage, you're coming from somewhere and you're going somewhere when you leave.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And it was so crazy because everything, like I didn't know that, you know, Lloyd Richards had mentored that whole generation that Black Americans know and love today in worship.
Yes.
I had no idea.
Very much so. They considered him the dean of African American theater because he had mentored so many people, everybody from, like you said, Lorraine Hansberry, Sidney Poitier, August Wilson, Samuel Jackson, all the greats who are now in their veteran years now.
Charles S. Dutton.
Yeah, Charles S. Dutton, Viola Davis, she was a part of that as well. Anybody who was involved with the Pittsburgh cycle, up until maybe 7 Guitars. I think that was the last collaboration of Lloyd Richards and August Wilson. After that, he moved on to some other directors, but he shepherded those first 5 of his 10 plays. And any of the actors, Ruben Santiago, he was among those.
He's brilliant too.
Yeah, it'll be brilliant. Rocky Carroll, any of them. But everybody just loved. What's my girl's name? Ella Joyce. The Ella Joyce was in that whole group. Even Lawrence Fishburne. Lawrence Fishburne was in the original production of Two Trains Running.
Really?
Oh yeah, and he admired. He had a lot to say about Lloyd Richards and his direction. So he learned a lot. And I just have so much respect for Lawrence Fishburne. Period. So.
I wonder, and this is just me, because let me ask this question because it'd be easier to segue into her.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna go into my favorite era and genre of Black films.
Mm-hmm.
I love I love this whole generation of actors. I'm very passionate about that whole generation. So what does Black exploitation actually mean? How important was the so-called Black exploitation genre in the 70s for African Americans? Because I've done research on it, and I've kind of discovered that Black exploitation, in the words of one of the lesser known Black actors, but I'll say he was the greatest. This was probably like the only Black man that I've heard where he's completely mastered the English language. Roscoe Lee Brown. Beautiful voice.
Yes.
He said that the term Black exploitation, as we use it today, is overused.
Mm-hmm.
And it was blown out of proportion. Even Ron O'Neal even said that, we were doing the same thing that Chuck Connors was doing when Bernie Casey had left football and became an actor. So is that true? Do you think that with people our age and younger or even older, do you think Black exploitation is important when it comes to African American image on film? And do you know what Black exploitation means. Like, what does it mean?
Yes, and the reason why I say it's history. I think you have to put black exploitation right in the same basket as minstrelsy. Yeah, you have to. The term was coined by a member of the Hollywood in Los Angeles NAACP, a gentleman named Junius Griffith.
Yes.
Griffin, who did not like the fact that black folks were now taking on these exploitation films like the Charles Bronson, like you said, and the other, and the Chuck Norris, and the Clint Eastwood. This genre was already out there. It just didn't have a black face. And so when Melvin Van Peebles, who pretty much ushers in that era with, and I have to say it right, Sweetback's badass song. That's what you have to say it. That's when it makes more sense when you say it like that. It ushered in that era, and quietly just kept. I would say, even if not artistically, it was a huge economic boom for Hollywood, because Hollywood had just come out of the 1960s. It pretty much had wore its public out with Sound of Music and Carousel and Mary Poppins. People were just not wanting to see that anymore. People were tired of that. People were tired of the fluff. And so that's why the exploitation film genre started. But it just wasn't catching on. I mean, there were some great white performers that were doing it, but it just wasn't catching on. It wasn't until Melvin Van Peebles comes out with Sweetback's badass song, and then Gordon Parks with Shaft, and then Superfly coming out, because Hollywood was bankrupt at the time. They were not making money. And when
they had to sell Dorothy slippers from Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, that was broke. That's the unspoken truth that Hollywood does not want to admit, that nobody was buying Hollywood. And then Hollywood discovered that some of its most loyal patrons was a minority group called African Americans, and they were going and supporting it. So they said, hey, why don't we just feature some kind of cheaply done films that will put black people centered in these. They might be stereotypical, they might be low budget, but at least these people are being seen. And here's what I think the value of studying black, and first of all, embracing black exploitation.
I love it.
So to not embrace black exploitation is like saying, well, I don't really want to call it minstrelsy. That's what it was. Just call it what it was. And you have Melvin Van Peebles' revolutionary movie being considered like a training video for the Black Panther Party. And you know how critical the Black Panther Party was. If they said every Black Panther needs to see this movie so you can learn how to survive, that was a compliment in and of itself. And then you had Shaft, which originally, again, another novel that was adapted into a film. The character Shaft was not a black character in the book. They made him a black character. Yeah. And so you can establish a black man as a lead role, as an action hero. So you got these people playing action roles. Then you fast forward to 1973 with the advent of my almost baby mama, Pam Grier, with Coffee and Foxy Brown, and and of course not too far behind Tamara Dobson. Yes. With these great black female stars, but they became the foundation for what we now know as black action heroes. Because you did not have any black female action heroes. They were black. I mean, they were kicking butt. They were shooting guns. If you watch Coffee, I mean, one of the most brilliant sequences of Coffee is at the end when she's basically held captive. She's about to be killed. She talks her captors out of releasing her. They think they're giving her some heroin. They can make her knock her out, basically date rape her, and then kill her. But she had replaced the heroin with sugar, and then she pretended to be high off the heroin. took her would-be rapist out and kind of did him in. The police, a rogue police officer that was in it, chases after her. He gets hit on the highway, and then the last police officer tries to get her. She makes his car flip over, so she kills 3 men in a span of about 10 minutes, and then finally tracks down the top kingpin, and then her boyfriend, who supposedly betrayed her. And it's just, and then she walks off by the side of a beach, and you hear this sweet sounding Roy Ayers music playing on the background as as she's walking down the beach. And I think that's also another great point, is with the advent of, and I think Sweetback's Badass Song does it. A little group helps supply the soundtrack and background for Melvin Van Peebles, or Earth, Wind and Fire, a little group called Earth, Wind and Fire. And so you got this whole advent of blaxploitation is not only introducing us to Black action heroes and stories in which Black people win, you're giving us these blockbuster movie music soundtracks, of one of which Isaac Hayes becomes the first Black person to win an Oscar for a song, with theme from Shaft. I mean, it's electric. And so after that becomes a template. Every blaxploitation film has to have this total jamming movie soundtrack, which also helps sell the movie, and a little movie. And I think Car Wash is like at the tail end of blaxploitation, when it starts to kind of fade off.
Like 75, 76.
76. And many people, I think the producer of Car Wash just said, I'm just going to take a loss for this, because I just don't think anybody's going to watch this film. And they decide, let's just take a huge, let's roll the dice and let's release this song, the title song of the film, before the film comes out. That song lit the whole country on fire in 1976. So before the film came out, people said, where's this song coming from? Oh, it's a soundtrack from a movie called Car Wash. I got to see this movie. So soundtracks actually were like hand in hand with blaxploitation films, and introduced us to a lot of, great music artists like Isaac Hayes, like Roy Ayers, of Rolls Royce, and just a number of people. James Brown did a soundtrack for, I think it may have been Little Caesar. Yeah, just amazing. Just amazing. I mean, and I think that's what separated the blaxploitation film from the, for lack of better words, the white exploitation films. And then after about 1978, it all just stopped. And Hollywood said, oh, we made our money, we recouped our funds, so we no longer want to make those films. And they just kicked these people to the curb, almost in the same way that these huge disco artists that made all of these record companies billions of dollars, we don't want to do disco anymore. So let's just put them out to pasture.
So I want to stay on blaxploitation for a second. So I would argue anybody down and tell people that our greatest group of actors, I'm just saying specifically thespians, came out of the Black exploitation era.
Oh, very much. Film actors, definitely.
Because I always tell people all the time that, my favorite actor he's like my top 5. My favorite actor is the
Calvin Lockhart.
Calvin Lockhart. What many people don't know about Calvin Lockhart was that he is the original Biggie Smalls. That's number one. Number 2, he was the first black man that was the first actor in residence for the Royal Shakespeare Company in London when he played Aaron the Moor in Titus Andronicus.
That's impressive.
You can find a picture of, if you go on the Shakespeare in Residence website, I'm gonna find it for you and I'm gonna shoot it to you.
Okay.
He's playing Aaron the Moor, and it's like, and I look at all these roles that the Black exploitation era people played, like especially Vanetta McGee. Vanetta McGee, she was like a little bit my wife too, and I used to watch her movies. Like, hey, she mine. You know, y'all
Mm.
can have Pam. Y'all can
No,
have Pam.
Pam's mine. Pam Grier is mine for now and forever. And
I
forever.
got
Ever.
I got Vanetta McGee.
Yes,
And
she good too, but I love Pam.
I noticed that these people were all theatrically trained. Like
Yes.
Calvin Lockhart, he knew how to speak several languages, and he had
Hmm.
theater companies back in the day.
Right.
Rosalind Cash, she
Oh
said
yeah.
in an interview that she got her start in New York, where she got all her trainings in New York. I would think that it's probably the Negro Ensemble Company. I wouldn't.
Yeah.
She
She's
didn't
definitely
go
grown some, and the Joseph Papp Shakespeare Theater Festival. She actually, I think she played in Lear. I think she played one of Lear's daughters. So
really.
yeah. Rosalind Cash has some major chops. Yeah.
You know, I knew she was a good actress when I saw her in Tales from the Hood.
Oh yeah. You knew she was good, and that was just scratching the surface for all the other stuff that she did.
Yeah, and it's like even Ron O'Neal, like the great Ron O'Neal, who was Priest in Superfly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I always watch this as like kind of like so that way I could know Ron O'Neal, because this is like his only interview he had. It's 7 parts where he talked about how back in the day, he knew Al Pacino.
Mm-hmm.
He worked with Al Pacino in New York in the
Yeah.
1970s.
Yeah.
Back in the day, and
They're probably in some acting studio together. You know, some acting. Trainers. Because I know I can't think of the name of there was a big acting studio that everybody went to at that time. I mean, black and white, and they just were very open. Let me see if I can find it.
and he came out of Caramel House. That's what you told me.
Yes, he did. He came out of Caramel House. Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee came out of Caramel. So there's this whole history that's linked to Caramel House, of which I have my 6 degrees of separation, having had 2 of my shows produced there over the last 10 to 15 years. I think Strauss was the acting coach. And a lot of people took, Lee Strasberg. That's what it was. They probably studied with Lee Strasberg in New York. That's the big acting studio. Yeah. Anybody who was anybody went through Strasberg.
Because Al Pacino, Lee Strasberg was the guy who played that old man who was dying in the first Godfather.
Okay, I did not know that. Wow.
That's Lee Strasberg. So
okay, wow.
If both of them were together, Ron O'Neal, and he probably came across Strasberg as well back in that day.
Yeah. I think Marilyn Monroe, just anybody who was anybody, studied with Strasberg, because Strasberg was just that acting coach, and he could pull the best out of everybody, and he was guru. He's the guru, man. And also shout out to Curtis Mayfield. I forgot to add Curtis Mayfield in there because the Superfly soundtrack is a bona fide classic now as well. And he was a brilliant writer. The late great Curtis Mayfield. He left us too soon, very tragically, but he left us with some amazing music. But especially that soundtrack of Superfly was phenomenal.
And that whole soundtrack, if people were to pay attention to it, that's an anti-drug song.
It is, yeah.
Fred is dead. That's talking about a junkie who got beat up and he wasn't in the right frame of mind,
Yeah, I'm your pusher man. I mean, he's really just talking about the evils of drugs in the Black community. The whole thing is just brilliant. It's just a brilliant, and of course, it had its own critics. People, you're glorifying drugs. No. I don't think Superfly glorified drugs anymore. The Godfather glorified, the mafia and mob violence. That's what was going on. People were buying heroin. People were strong. And I think sometimes that we're so sensitive as African Americans. We don't want anybody to see our dirty laundry. I know we did drugs, but I don't want the white folks to see it. But we did. And why would others be prostitutes? Because there are Black female prostitutes. There are Black drug addicts. There are Black alcoholics. And so when we start embracing, and it goes back to the whole argument about the Black community not being a monolith. We got all kinds of different people in the Black community. And oftentimes when we celebrate this diversity, it's often met with a lot of negativity from some, not all, but some members from the Black community. Oh, we shouldn't be doing anything like that. Like Spike Lee's School Days was not received in 1988. When I was in graduate school, it was considered blasphemy. And I know we're going to say that for Spike a little bit later, but I just want to throw that out there that right now, School Days and Do the Right Thing are now, Hollywood classics. But when it came out, Hollywood didn't like that stuff. People panned it. People thought, oh, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. Including Bamboozle. People all thought Bamboozle was horrible, and now the critics are praising it. Like, oh, it was so groundbreaking. You didn't say that in 2000 when it came out. Shut up. Be quiet.
I want to add this last thing on blaxploitation. With you saying that a lot of the ones that we know and love, the first Black action stars.
Yes.
Hollywood, to me, and I hate this, but this is just my opinion. Hollywood, they claim to give Pam Grier her flowers, but nobody is really talking about she is the reason why we see these she's the reason why we see these female action stars today.
Yeah, black or white. Yeah. She created the template for the Black female action star, period.
Right. They say they want to give it to Sigourney Weaver that she was the first female star.
I mean, Coffee and Foxy Brown in 1973 and 1974, respectively. Aliens doesn't come out till 1979. So this is predating by 5 to 6 years. So no, but they just want to say, well, if you want to say she was the first white female action star, yeah, but not the first female. Or maybe they want to relegate Pam Grier to the first Black female action star. It's like, no, she was the first Black female action star, period.
Because they tend to do that. They're okay with doing that to the great Dwayne Jones when he did the Night of the Living Dead. They're okay with saying that he was the first Black lead in the horror film, which is fine. I mean, that's true. He's one of the GOATs for that one as well. But
in a white Hollywood film, not in the with Moscow Michaud and my other brother Spencer.
Spencer Williams.
Yeah, Spencer Williams. I mean, you had Black leads in Spencer Williams, Son of Ngagi. So you had and others, but it's always splitting hairs when it comes to race, unfortunately. So
correct. And one more thing about the Black exploitation genre concerning African American sensitivity to our depictions on film. I can remember I was listening to Ron O'Neal, and Ron O'Neal was talking about how when Superfly came out, the New York Times had said that this was the greatest gangster film since Cagney's Scarface, right? But for some odd reason, you had Junius Griffin, who had dinner with Ron O'Neal and said, hey, I took my daughter to see the film. I loved you in that, right? And then he even talked about Cicely Tyson, which I myself personally, how should I say? Because I want to work in the Hollywood in the future as a writer, and I'm going to say I don't appreciate I appreciate her for what she did when she kind of had when she was I appreciate some of the things she did, but I don't necessarily agree with what she did when talking about the Black exploitation genre. She said, Ron O'Neal said that, I think he saw her at at one of those film conferences or whatever, right? And he said that when they asked her, did she see Superfly? She said, I know I ain't seen Superfly, but I know it was a piece of trash. And she was one of those Black actors who were really against the Black exploitation genre, we didn't have any the first Black action star is really Jim Brown. He's no different from Chuck Connors
Yeah.
in the Rifleman,
Right.
and I'm like, come on now, Cicely, you can't do that. And then it also seemed that the ones who were, and this is just me, this is just what I've seen, the black exploitation actors who were the face of black exploitation, they pretty much went into obscurity.
Yes.
But then the ones who you really didn't know about still managed to survive. Like Vanetta McGee, we've seen her in Brother Future, and she also played. She was Carl Lumley's wife in real life.
I
They
did not
have a
know that.
scene.
Wow.
She was the pregnant lady that was in To Sleep with Anger.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. Yeah. Oh, I loved her in that.
And even Roscoe Lee Brown played. He was the voice of the Kingpin in the 1990 Spider-Man animated series. So it's a shame that the black exploitation actors went out the way they did. We should have had more respect. We should have, Hollywood, it's not we, but Hollywood.
Yeah.
These were probably the greatest African American actors there ever were.
Well, here's what I think, Kuhani. I think one person did, but I think they even exploited the black exploitation to his advantage, and I think that's Quentin Tarantino. If you look at many of his films, whether it's Jackie Brown or Kill Bill or Pulp Fiction, he's pulling from that black exploitation foundation, because his story is during the 70s, his white mom had a black boyfriend. And of course, the black boyfriend would take the black mom and him to go see black exploitation films. And he fell in love with black exploitation films. So on the one hand, I can commend him for taking something like Jackie Brown and reviving Pam Grier's career. Because I would say the movie Jackie Brown is almost like a neo black exploitation film, because it has all the elements there. But with a modern twist, and I think it's a little bit more diverse, and of course the actors in are much more experienced and well known. But yeah, I would say Quentin Tarantino did that, and he also kind of played around with the whole spaghetti western genre with Django Unchained, and of course,
Hateful Eight.
Hateful Eight, all these different things. So if somebody was close to showing some respect, I would say the closest person would be Quentin Tarantino, but even his treatment of it maybe it's a little more self-serving. Yeah, it's a little more self-serving, sure.
Yeah, even what's my man named Samuel Jackson, the greatest character actor there is right now.
Oh yeah,
says,
bar none.
He said in the interview that Quentin thinks he's a black man. He said that jokingly, but the fact that he said that jokingly tells me everything that I need to know about him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I wish I could go deeper into it in public, but I feel with that it says everything.
It says everything without saying anything at all. It really does. And that's, like I said, that's why I gave that caveat about, I guess, him attending black exploitation films as a child, numerous ones, with his mother's black boyfriend, qualifies him to be an honorary black person and an honorary black filmmaker. So he feels totally comfortable and qualified to use the N-word in many of his films, which he does. He uses it a lot. And I think maybe that's why, because he feels, well, I was kind of raised in the black community, so I feel like I'm a part of you're not. But go ahead, like this one guy says, I follow this one gentleman on Instagram, and he gets into it a lot with conservatives, and his sign up thing is his go off patriot. He always go off patriot. I was like, go off patriot. Yeah, like whatever. But yeah, but you're right. But I think to her credit, I think Pam Grier made a career after black exploitation. She's one of the few And she did the L Word and some other something wicked this way comes. She got a chance to do a Disney film, which I thought was very good. And so she was in some of those sorts of really nice films, because I don't think Tamara Dobson did much after her days in blaxploitation, and unfortunately we lost her at an early age. She died very young, but
Yeah.
very few people made it past. It's almost like the curse of child actors. Very few child actors who are really well established as child actors make into adult acting. Those who do are rare, and they have a lot. And apparently, they must have a lot of support, because it's difficult.
Yeah, it really is. And that's, yeah. Pam is very, she loves Quentin, and
Mm-hmm.
which is understandable. I mean,
Yeah,
if it wasn't for Jackie Brown, she would have faded into the
into
and
obscurity, pretty
and
much, as
thankfully,
far as film's concerned. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
like she still looked good, in Jackie
She
Brown,
looked
even
she looked amazing, and that came out
Samuel
in 1997. Actually, came out like 27 years ago. So that's a while back.
Samuel Jackson said there in that movie, Jackie, you a fine MFer. I knew you got to keep N-word repellent to keep them dudes off you.
Mm-hmm. But you can see the elements of both Coffee and Foxy Brown, that kind of female ingenuity. I'm going to outsmart all these men and come out on top. And that's the one thing I really admire. And I really enjoy showing that movie when we do blaxploitation in my film class, because I really do want some of the young ladies to see, like, hey, there was a black female action hero long before all these other people you've seen. I think Sanaa Lathan did a little bit in one of the Predator franchises. And I'm
Kimmy
sure,
Chamber could have did back in the day. I could see her. You know what I mean? But
yeah.
nobody liked that. They say that was terrible. The
And the
aliens.
scripts that American International Pictures put out, they were terrible. This is they were terrible, but they were vehicles. And so you have to look at them. And it's just really funny. There's a scene in Coffee that I'm almost certain that Robert Townsend lifted in his classic, The Hollywood Shuffle, because one of the characters says, why you want to do that? Why you want to do that? Why you want to put a gun on me? I went, that sounds like, why you want to put a knife? I be gotten a weapon. I said, man, I know he must have been channeling that at that particular time. So I had to shout out, Robert Townsend, who was also one of my favorite filmmakers and actors. They're very good.
He was for real. And tell me if I'm wrong, because I've only known about the 80s through movies, right?
Mm-hmm.
It seemed that Robert Townsend was really, after they kicked black directors, black actors to the side.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed that Robert Townsend was the only black actor. I mean, the only black director who pretty much had it all to himself.
Yeah.
He made it by himself.
Hollywood Shuffle put him on the map as a filmmaker, because before then, he really was strictly an actor. He was really an actor. And I know that frustration as an actor / writer, director myself is when you first get into acting as a black actor, you're thinking, hey, there'll be some roles for me because there are black people who've existed, or the people creating black characters, or they're black, novels. You're just thinking there's this plethora of roles. There aren't. And even those roles that are out there, the overwhelming majority of the roles written for black folks is still written by white folks. So it's rare that you come across like a Robert Townsend or a Spike Lee or the others that were making these films that you get a chance to plug in. Even Robert Townsend himself is quoted when he was in the movie Soldier Story. He said he was so excited to show up to work every day. And people said, man, why do you act that way? He said, man, aren't you excited? He said, and a lot of actors said, no, man, don't get used to this. This is rare to see a black cat. Just think about this. Soldier's Story was lifted from the play Soldier's Play from Broadway. He said, unless it was written by a black playwright, produced by the Negro Ensemble Company, and open to, great acclaim on Broadway, it would have never been adapted into the film. And once it did get adapted into a film, Norman Jewison, directs it. So it
Yeah.
wasn't like, you know what I mean? So it didn't follow the pattern of a total cultural break, but it just kind of, I was glad to see it done. It's like that classic argument, between Eddie Murphy and August Wilson. If you put Eddie Murphy and August Wilson in the same sentence, people are like, why would you talk about those two together? Well, Fences was supposed to have been made back in the 80s. But Eddie Murphy wanted to buy the rights to it and said, he goes, man, we could easily hand James Earl Jones the Oscar. If he plays Troy, there's no way the Academy can't go to him once he plays this thing. And he asked August, what do you want? I'll give you anything you want. I want a part. I want to play his son, Lions, and that's all I really want. But I'll produce it. I put my name on it because I'm the biggest box office. He says, what do you want, August? He said, I got one request. I want a black director. He says, oh man, come on, I can't do that. He said, look, brother, you said I can have anything I want. That's the only thing I want is a black director. Well, Hollywood doesn't work that way. He went around, and I know Eddie was a little bit younger then. He was kind of full of himself, but the deal fell through because Eddie could not guarantee, even though he's the number one box star, in Hollywood, he still cannot finesse getting a black director. And I know who he wanted. He wanted Lloyd Richards. He wanted Lloyd Richards to do it because that was his mentor at that time. And Lloyd Richards could have done it. He could easily done it. But yeah.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
See, and that shows the type of power that we actually so-called do have in Hollywood. Even if you're on top, you can't really do too much.
Yeah.
That's why they always have the one Negro at a time rule.
Always one. I mean, as long as Denzel's acting, there's not going to be, two Denzels. There's always going to be Denzel and everybody else. Once Denzel stops acting and decides to call it a day or just does strictly producing and directing, then they'll probably elevate another, maybe a Will Smith, maybe some of the other actors, or maybe it'll be Samuel L. Jackson. Who knows? Who knows? But Hollywood has this thing. They're not comfortable with a group of successful black folks. It's just not their comfort level. And even though Hollywood purports to be very liberal and open, it was very conservative. It's very conservative because if its liberal social conscience reflect its film and cinematic conscience, we would have much more diverse Hollywood. We wouldn't be having conversations about, hey, how come more black folks don't win Oscars? How come black folks don't win more Emmys and Tonys, blah, 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 blah. It's like, no, because Hollywood's still relatively conservative when it comes to, people of color and diversity. Correct. Doesn't have to be, but they choose to be. It's their choice.
They'll have a white female action lead who's of an alternative lifestyle before they have a black female action. That's what I keep saying. I keep seeing white female action stars right now instead of the black female action stars right now. It's kind of it's crazy damage control due to the Oscar so white thing. But that's what I'm saying right now.
Well, they tried with Taraji, with Proud Mary. They tried to make her an action star. And again, I just don't think that I have not seen the movie, but I've heard that it just wasn't a very good movie. But they were thinking maybe because of Taraji's star power, she could pull it off. But apparently not. It didn't sit too well.
Taraji, she's classically trained as well.
Yes, she is.
Talks about that. He talked about that in the interview. But Taraji, she's black famous.
Yeah.
She's
Oscar nominated. She's been nominated for an Oscar.
But we'll know who she is before a white person in public knows who she is, which is
right.
I mean, it's not bad, it's not bad at all.
I mean, because she's one of ours. She's one of ours. She's from our community, and she's very proudly from our community, and she always represents. And I've always liked her. I would love someday to work with her. But I'm just hoping I got enough to pay her, because she said first time she got paid $500,000 when Tyler Perry paid her. So I'm like, hope I work with somebody that can pay you. But dang, not saying that's a lot of money. In fact, I think that's pretty cheap, to be honest, because you got
Yeah,
some actors making $20 million a picture, and she's only asking for $500,000. That's still kind of minimum wage, basically, according to Hollywood standards. Maybe even sub minimum wage, considering all things considered. But
so let's go into the 90s with
the
the black
90s,
film explosion, like Spike Lee, uh, who else? The Boys in the Hood director,
the John
uh,
Singleton,
Love Jones. We had a lot
yeah,
of actors back in the we had a lot of directors back in the day that pretty much was a one and done. Let's talk about the the black film explosion.
yeah. I think after the '80s, the '80s were pretty much dominated by the Arnold Schwarzeneggers and the Bruce Willises with the big action thing. And of course, even within those films, there were hints of black folks. Yeah, Reginald Vell Johnson uh, being kind of like a little bit of sidekick of Bruce Willis
Brilliant.
in the Die Hard series, and you may have seen uh,
Carl
we had,
Weathers and Predator.
Carl Weathers in the Rocky series and some other things, but black folks were still in the margins at this time, in the late '80s, and all during that time. But then the '90s, black folks said we're no longer going to depend on Hollywood to define who we are. We're going to define it ourselves. And I just came across an interview about Spike Lee the other day, and he was talking about how his studio basically cut off his funding for Malcolm X. And they said, we're not going to, you've reached your bond. We're not going to extend any more money. He said, but I bet you if I was Martin Scorsese or if I was, Francis Ford, Coppola, all these other folks, you'd extend that a courtesy to me. So he had to get on the phone and call some folks. So he called Bill Cosby, and he called Michael Jordan, and he called Magic Johnson, and they all put up the money for that.
Oprah.
Yeah, Oprah. Yeah, definitely Oprah. Yeah, black folks with money, black folks with money, and they came through too. They and that's how the film got made.
And we love talking about Oprah and how she has. I don't know. I don't know what black people's problems with Oprah. I need to do more research into her. But once I found that out about her, that she gave some bread to Spike, I was like,
It's complicated.
Really?
Oprah's relationship with the black community, including her BFF Gayle King, is very complicated because on the one hand they seem to be very black community orientated, but then you look at some of these interviews that they do, some of the things that they say, it just makes you question. And I mean, Oprah kind of embarrassed Toni Braxton about her bankruptcy thing without knowing all the facts behind it. And she basically just boiled down to say, well, it sounds like you just didn't, pay your bills and you didn't handle your business, blah, blah, blah. I was like, no, it was much deeper than that. It was much more nuanced. And I think she may have been doing this for her white audience when she was really white audience oriented. And of course, Gayle King with the infamous R. Kelly interview, which turned into a parody and comedy and tragedy at the same time. And then that horrible remark she made about Kobe after his death. I'm like, the man's dead. Why would you bring up something like that? And she got a lot of criticism for that. So these sorts of people did come through for Spike. You also had again Robert Townsend slipping into the '90s as well after the success of Hollywood Shuffle, Five Heartbeats, Meteor Man. So he had a couple of good hits in the early. So I would say I would give Robert Townsend a lot of credit for the black superhero genre that he doesn't get credit for. Because whereas Meteor Man is a little bit of a melodrama and heavy on comedy and kind of campiness, it really does say, hey, black people could be superheroes. But I don't think people took it seriously. But looking back now, it's a very good film.
Yeah. There was one film that I saw on Disney Channel years ago that I think is Meteor Man.
Yeah,
but it
that's
was
what I'm talking.
superhero.
Meter Man. Yeah.
It was a
Hmm.
whole family of superhero. There was a whole family of superheroes, and the oldest son that he had didn't have superpowers, right?
Mm.
And it was one thing where he, in order to like impress his parents, he did certain things like he'll unnail the door when his parents walked in. He'll throw the door, but knowing that he nailed it out and made him think that he had superhuman strength. And I can remember when I was a little boy and I think I was maybe about 4 or 5. I didn't understand what was going on with Meteor Man. I really didn't.
Yeah.
But me seeing black superheroes, it always stuck with me. Sherman Hemsley played the grandfather in there,
Okay.
and so yeah, I think they want Robert Townsend to kind of fade up, like they give Tyler Perry the credit that Robert Townsend should really be getting. You know,
And then you had Damon Wayans in 1994 with Blank Man, which is kind of again another superhero, but a bit of a parody, but still there was hints of that there. So we got some really brilliant people, and of course we got Spike just totally dominating. Coming off the success of Do the Right Thing in 1989. Then you got Jungle Fever, you got Clockers, you got Crooklyn. So he really did some of his best work in the 90s. I mean,
and
he really dominated the 90s with his film.
the Negro Ensemble Company, that whole alumni comes out
Oh
and
yeah.
shows everything in the, that shows everything in the African American films.
Mm-hmm.
Like I always tell people that Denzel, Samuel L. Jackson, Viola Davis, Charles S. Dutton, who else? Robert Townsend.
Yeah, Courtney B. Vance. All these folks are coming out of that, and Angela Bassett, the young Angela Bassett. Young Denzel. They're all coming out of the Negro Ensemble. If they're not coming out of Negro Ensemble, they're coming out of the August Wilson Pittsburgh Cycle plays, because that's kind of almost like a magnet for all of these great folks.
Yeah.
They get to start in these August Wilson plays, because August Wilson is like a Black American Shakespeare for us. It's considered epic to be in one of his plays.
And it's like, what else? I would even say we had a good spring of actors that came out in the 90s as well, like Clifton Powell.
Oh yeah.
He comes out of that New York theater scene, even though he took acting in college, but
Mm-hmm.
he comes out of there. The Hughes brothers,
Keith David's doing some really amazing stuff. Well, I think is a very underrated actor. Very underrated.
I love Keith David.
He's amazing.
Keith David, he was the original voice of Spawn.
Spawn,
the
yeah.
animated series.
Yeah.
And
another great voice. Another great voice. Whoa.
He was a speech teacher before he actually got in the platoon and everything else.
Well, I did not know that. That's awesome. That makes sense, because he has like great diction. But whenever you can tell when he speaks, he just has that sort of sonorous voice that just rings with you. So
see, and that shows the power of, in my opinion, that it shows the importance of learning Shakespeare.
Mm-hmm.
Because Shakespeare, once you completely understand Shakespeare, and that's what I'm thankful for my 7 years of theatrical training in middle and high school. Once I understood Shakespeare and knew how to say it, I found out that I've mastered, could you say that we've mastered the English language?
If you've done a Shakespeare play, yeah, you probably have, because you had to learn how to breathe, the feet, the iambic pentameter, all of that. Because if you don't do it right, it stands out like a sore thumb. And I was fortunate to have been in several Shakespeare plays in undergrad. Didn't get so much in graduate school, which I was very disappointed about. But I was in Julius Caesar. Love's Labor's Lost, which is very rarely done. I actually really liked that show. I was one of the kings in that, so I had a huge part in that. And I was so mad that so few people came to see that. I guess when they realized that, a black guy was going to be one of the leads in the show, like, it probably is not going to be good. It's like, no, we rocked that thing. We rocked it. I was very proud to do that show.
Yeah, Delroy Lindo talked about it in an interview when he did Shakespeare in the Park as Othello in the 90s, that there's there's even another running myth. I mean, another secret, because you probably know about this more than I would. He said that a lot of people feel that black people, we can't really do Shakespeare besides Othello and Aaron the Moor and the Prince of Morocco. Is that true? Have you kind of encountered that before?
I've heard that myth before, and it is a myth. And the reason why I can say it's a myth is because I was fortunate 20 years ago to be in a performance here in St. Louis, Shakespeare Festival St. Louis, in a production of As You Like It. And this brother, there's a good friend of mine, played Orlando, and he just killed it. And Orlando is not a traditional African character from Shakespeare. He's more of the European strain, but he was amazing. And I've seen other black folks at my alma mater, the U of I, a couple years after I left. I made such a stink for not being able to do a Shakespeare show or a classic show. And I did one classic. I was in George Bernard Shaw's Arms and the Man, but I really wanted to do a Shakespeare show because they were doing Taming of the Shrew. And I didn't need to be Petruchio. I was like, I just want to be in it just to get the experience. But I made a lot of noise by saying, hey, don't invite people to your program and entice them with the opportunity to do Shakespeare and you never cast them. Because this is academic theater. I don't have to be at professional level in academic theater because it's a learning environment. And so as the story goes, when they did Merchant of Venice, the department chair was so afraid that I was going to come back and protest. He cast a black woman as Portia, and they said that it was one of the greatest performances they've ever seen. Her as Portia, but there was no, recognizing, oh, she's going to be a black Italian woman. No, she just played Portia. And I heard you. I wish I'd have known. I sure would have come to see it. But she was great. I heard she was fantastic. So and like I said, we got other people playing. I thought a couple of years back I went to go see King Lear at St. Louis Shakespeare Festival, and it was an all black cast of King Lear, which I thought was amazing. The amazing
Andre the Shields.
Yeah. Andre the Shields. Amazing.
My white homeboy, he went to see that. He went to see Andre the Shields up there, and I knew the girl. I knew the director of that particular production.
Mm-hmm.
We had drinks at a bar, and she was telling me like Andre the Shields, she said he was the man on there.
Yeah.
As King Lear, and it was other things that she told me that I'm not gonna say on here.
Nope.
But yeah, the 90s for African Americans, I think we really showed how powerful we were.
Yeah, definitely diversity. Mm-hmm.
Like Clifton Powell, he's very powerful, as Cuddy,
Yeah.
Samuel Jackson and Denzel, they're the greatest alumni of the Negro Ensemble Company.
Right.
And look at them. They're the top 2 black men in Hollywood.
And then you got the Hughes brothers. A lot of people forget about the Hughes brothers coming out with Menace to Society and Dead Presidents. These very young guys, come out with this stuff. And Matty Rich gets lost in the mix too. He had a little film called Straight Outta Brooklyn. And that was a big hit. And what was that? The Inkwell with Lorenz Tate and Jada Pinkett Smith. So we had a nice spattering of black films, black filmmakers, black actors doing some great things in the 90s. And it looked like we were poised to make that turn. And then once we got to the late 90s, early 2000s, then and I think we thought we had arrived because we had this series of so-called Buffy films, everything from The Best Man to The Wood. And there are a couple other films that Brown Sugar. So it looks like we were going to make that turn, and then all of a sudden, everything just kind of left.
Yeah, another one, Richard T. Jones, who's very slept on, came out of that as well.
Mm-hmm.
But Spike Lee, what you bring up where we just disappear, Spike Lee, he has his militant moments.
Yeah.
Where he'll say, every 10 years or so, they always say we found this new generation of Black talent that was never seen before.
Right.
And then they just disappear.
Right.
Or matter of fact, I don't even go say disappear. They're not mainstream anymore. Because Keith David comes out of the 90s and he's still around. You just don't see him doing mainstream stuff anymore. We're still eating.
He's still doing some stuff, and his major first big film was The Thing back in the 80s, a horror film. I mean, he's one of the, also like you had introduced to me, a part of the great horror noir catalog. People like Loretta Devine, she was in People Under the Stairs and some of these other things. So that's another genre that I think sometimes we overlook, and it's easy to overlook. But look at all the Black horror films or horror films that had Black people in them in the 90s. People Under the Stairs, like you said, Tales from the Hood, even Vampire in Brooklyn. That's a bit of a Candyman. So you got this whole spate of Black films, of horror films, or interchangeably Black horror films and Black people in horror films. But whatever the case is, we were being seen in a genre which we had not been previously seen before, and we were representing like Rachel True in the what was the name of the film?
The Craft.
Yeah, The Craft. She said definitely in that documentary Horror Noir that a lot of people did not really give her the respect that she deserved. She was the only Black actor in The Craft, and I think just recently they did a Comic-Con and they invited cast members of The Craft, and she was not invited.
What the heck? How you gonna get Jeff Campbell in there, and how you gonna get everybody else in there? But you see, we don't belong. Yep. We belong in that.
She's a central character in The Craft. She's a central character in this movie, but yet they held a Comic-Con and she was not invited. And then when she showed up, it was a little awkward. Like, hey, Rachel, how'd you know we were hi? I was like, how are you gonna? And I think she may have been more disappointed in her co-stars who didn't speak up for her.
And that says something about them as well.
That says a whole lot. That says a whole lot. The co-star should have said, "Oh no, we're not going to do this without Rachel. Come on now. I mean, this is a classic classic horror film, and she just happened to be a very, seen, Black actor in it. She was a very integral part of the cast, and she was representing Black folks. And Rachel True, if you ever get to see this, she's fine. Rachel, she still looked good too. She still looked good. Rachel still looked good.
I saw her in they did a movie version of Horror Noir.
Mm-hmm.
And Tony Todd's in there, Luke James. And Rachel True. I mean, hey, we want to work with you. When we get our script together,
for sure.
And
call me, Rachel. Call me. We can have lunch. Call me.
Right. We gotta get this together. Like so. But even with you talking about that, how they didn't invite her, that even opens my eyes to another thing of where I feel that these white execs or whatever you call them, they want us to be we don't belong in the supernatural horror film. They want us to be in a horror series called Power, or they want us to be in these urban horror movies.
Well, that gives us more impetus to write our own stories and make our own films, much in the spirit of the great ancestor Oscar Micheaux. Oscar Micheaux did not look to get permission from Hollywood to make his, 50 something odd films. He didn't. He was not looking for the approval. He said, "I'm going to make them my own way. I'm going to write them from my stories, from my books, from my scripts, from my ideas, and my collaborations." So I really think we need to get back to that because there's so many stories we could tell. But I think people have this thing in their mind. Well, I don't want to do that because Hollywood won't let it be produced. Then produce it independently. And I'm not saying that independent films aren't challenging. They are. But I think you do have to be a good salesperson, good marketing person, because then you got to ask people for money. I know that's hard for people. I don't have to ask people, well, what kind of film do you want to make? So if you want to make the Hollywood studio film, they're not going to tell our stories the way we want to tell them. So to tell, like, Just Another Girl on the IRT, another great 90s film. It was an independent film, but yet it had its own audience. And another great film that really gets overlooked is Strictly Business. My
I
goodness.
love that.
Woo,
Because
the messages in that. Wow.
what I really liked about Strictly Business was the chemistry between Halle Berry and the other guy that was in
Joseph P.
there.
Thomas. Yeah.
I could it was so crazy because I
It was
could
real.
really see them be together. Like, you know
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
Total opposites. I mean, she's kind of really streetwise and edge. He's real, buttoned down and conservative. Yeah, and Tommy Davidson being the kind of the comic relief in there, I thought that was good.
And Samuel Jackson was the HNIC in there too.
Yeah, but to me, the most powerful message of Strictly Business is when they couldn't get the funding, they called on the Hollerin' Brothers. The Hollerin' Brothers had their own black bank, and they said, "We'll bankroll the nightclub." And that was, and I think that might have been the last straw for Hollywood. So I think maybe Hollywood said, "So, is that what we're doing now? So you're saying we can't help you, and if we say no, you'll go out and get your own money and do it." Yeah, that's what we've been saying. If you won't give us the money to let us tell our stories in the way we want to tell them, we will go get our own money and we will make our own film. And what's wrong with that? There are many ethnicities who do it all the time. The Italians do it, the Irish do it, the English, the French. They do these films, and they don't. They do it with their own cultural sensibility. I mean, look what Spielberg did with Schindler's List. He didn't ask for permission to say, "Hey, Hollywood, can I make another Holocaust movie?" I'm sure Hollywood would say, "Well, we already have a lot of Holocaust movies, Stephen. Why would you make another one?" Well, making this one was groundbreaking. And it was. And Schindler's List is one of my favorite movies. It's a great movie. I just wish we could also tell the story of the cruelty of Leopold in the Congo, and Namibia and all these other places, that when you hear of some of the world's most wicked people, everybody goes, "Oh, you put Hitler right at the top, or you put Mussolini, and you put all these other despots." But then the name Leopold never, ever shows up. A man who killed over 1 million African people, cut off limbs, cut off their hands, and cut off their feet when they wouldn't dig diamonds for him or do his bidding. Main people.
Million Congolese and
yeah,
the population to one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but he never even shows up on the radar. In fact, I've never heard a single movie about this, and I kind of know why. Or have you ever seen a movie about Patrice Lumumba?
There has been one.
I have not seen it. When did it come out? I'm not saying it has.
Came out in 2000. He was played by the great Eric Ibune. I'm gonna send you the movie about it. It was directed by Raoul Peck. If you're familiar with him, he did that great documentary about James Baldwin and Exterminate the Brutes. So I'm gonna send it to you. It's really
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
It's really
It apparently flew under the radar. Because that's a story that just not just only Americans or Black Americans, but just anybody who's interested in freedom and self determination. That's a great story. I hope somebody maybe does another take on it, because that's a story that needs to come out. About the effects of colonialism and imperialism on people of African descent and how African people push back. And when Lumumba pushed back, they said, "Well, we got to get rid of him. We got to off him. Don't kill him."
Yep. He only survived about 2 months in office.
Yeah, because it made all that change.
Yeah, he was pretty much a wanted man when he did that speech, and also when he got help from the Russians as well.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very tragic.
Yeah.
Last question.
Yes.
Where do you see Black film going right now in 2024?
Where do I see Black film going in 2024? I can see it going in a number of directions, but I would say the direction I believe could be the most impactful or progressive is through Afrofuturism, to be totally honest. Because Afrofuturism could be that nice new shiny bells and whistles, the nice little thing like that Hollywood would go, ooh, what's this Afrofuturism thing? Like, who never heard about that? But I think Hollywood would kind of like, since I never heard of it, I'm not going to touch it. And then Afrofuturism goes up and blows up. And we got a little taste of it with Black Panther, and I think Hollywood started warming up to it. I still don't think Hollywood's quite embraced it, but I think there's so many things that you could do with Afrofuturism. You can tell contemporary, because Hollywood, Broadway, and television are very afraid of contemporary issues that face Black folks. If we want to talk about the civil rights era things, yeah, that's far enough distance. But as far as things that are happening right now, The Hate You Give and some other films that are dealing with police brutality have been just mercilessly attacked. So why not tell a story about police brutality in 2072? Or 2068 or 2054, and I think most people's minds like, wow, that's far enough away that, yeah, let's see what's going on. So instead of just saying, hey, this is the future, we'll just say it's in the future. But what we really mean is it's happening right now. And I think that's the strength of Afrofuturism, is you can tell a contemporary story. And if somebody says, well, are you basing this on the situation that happened last year? So, oh, no, this is something I'm thinking happened. What seems a lot like, I said, well, they say at the end of the film, the people here are fictional, and any similarity with real life people in real life is purely coincidental. That's their way of saying wink, wink. Yeah, we're basing on real situations. So I think that's the tool that I think we as African American artists, whether we're directors, writers, actors, that we could really get on that train. What is the name of that? There's a great film. They shot part of it at the Ulysses S. Grant National Historic Site. It was a Black slave film. I hate to say slave film, but it was futuristic. So I'm glad I got. Kindred is one. They shot some of it here in St. Louis. It'll come to me, but it was really, really great. It was a short film, but it was basically about Black people from a different galaxy coming to the United States in the 1850s and wanting to emancipate some of our enslaved ancestors, and many of them didn't want to be emancipated. They were scared, like, no, we're afraid, we're afraid. But it was a short film. But I would say definitely Afrofuturism is definitely the way to go.
And with you, and it's like, I'm thinking about this too. Like, we have a new breed of powerful African American actors now.
Mm-hmm.
Like one actor that I would love to work with is St. Louis native Sterling K. Brown.
Oh, yes.
Because even like how he looks, it's crazy because like he's a good looking guy, right? But
Mm-hmm.
then at the same time, he could also play a nerd.
Yes.
So we could have him be the romantic lead or the black man who got raised by a white family all
Right.
his life.
Yeah.
And he marries a black wife. And he
The movie
got a
called
crazy
it's called Underneath. That's what it's called. It's called Underneath. Have you heard that film?
underneath. No, I
Yeah.
haven't.
If you go on YouTube, there's a trailer for it underneath, and you'll see some spots that were shot here in St. Louis. But it's really a great film. So that's where I see it going. I also think that there is room for more biopics, because I think biopics serve their purpose to tell stories that are being erased or banned from books. So you can't ban people from going to the movies, at least not yet, or going to the theater. So I would love to do. I would like to write a biopic about Nina Simone that doesn't
I don't know
star,
what that was.
you know, my girl Zoe. Um, I think they actually put blackface on her.
Yeah, that was some weird. They gave her a 1970s.
It was
I
so weird.
don't know.
The person I think is a dead rigger for her. Are you familiar with Michaela?
Michaela Cole.
Yeah, Michaela Cole.
Oh yeah, she's beautiful. She's a wonderful writer.
Yes,
Chewing
she is.
Gum. I
She
think
is.
another season's coming out pretty soon with
She
Chewing
could
Gum.
she could play Nina Simone. She's like almost like a dead ringer for Nina Simone. I would love to see. And I know it'll be this. Oh, but she's British. Like, yeah, she's British, but I think she could also pull it off. And I for one, because I believe in the tenets of the Honorable Marcus Garvey. Um, I think we need to get away from this. Why are we letting all these black British actors play all these American roles? Like, yeah, apparently y'all not really done your homework. Because back in the day, when a lot of these African films were coming out, they would only feature African American actors being African, or that great Jamaican film Mighty Quinn, in which Denzel Washington had to don a Jamaican accent that didn't quite sound very good at all. But
Then they
he
had
did try. He did try, but it just didn't come off. Of course, Robert Townsend was not very good at all. He was very entertaining to watch, but the accents were the dialects were not good. So I'm all about. I would like to purposely write a film or develop a film that includes Black British actors or Black British characters and African American characters. Have the African Americans play the British characters and the British characters play the African American characters. So we can settle that once and for all. That we are Black. We are of the African diaspora. And yes, somebody from a Black British actor could play King. Uh, David Oyelowo did a reasonable job. I think I feel like I could have played it a little bit better. That's just me, but I still think he did a great job. Trying to think some other, of course, Carmen Ejojo played Coretta. So you got this whole group of Black British actors playing, African American iconic people. And so I said, hey, what about all the great Black British leaders throughout time and throughout the ages? Hey, why not let somebody African American play one of them?
and
And not kind of like a one-upmanship, but just like, hey, why don't we start diversifying ourselves and getting away from this kind of hateful thing about like, well, every time a good Black role comes up, African American biopic or historical figure, somebody British gets it. Like, yeah, because they're pretty good. Some of them are pretty damn good. Good actors.
what's funny in terms of like representation? I'm very close with a black British person. His name's Robin Walker. He wrote a book called When We Ruled on African History. And he told me that back in the day, because he's about, I think, the same age as you.
Mm-hmm.
He told me
Yeah,
that back in
you say he's about 30? He's about 30 years old? Yeah, he's about 30.
yeah, he's about 30 years old. You know, he told me that back in the 90s, black black Brits, the only action stars they had were African American actors.
Yeah.
Because they really, up in England, the UK, they really act like black people don't exist over there. I thought it was bad in American representation.
So you see why they clamor to do those sorts of roles, because they get shut out, and my solution to that is like, hey, why don't we create some stuff like that? Because I know there are black stories, like, for example, do you remember the story, you know the song Electric Avenue by Eddie Grant?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in one of my classes at SLU, I actually learned the real history behind that. It was a huge protest. Ironically, 1981, a young black British man got shot, surprising, by the British police, by the London police. And it led to rioting. It led to all sorts of protests. Why we never heard about this? And it happened on a little street called Electric Avenue. That's why Eddie Grant's saying we're going to rock down to Electric Avenue, and then we take it higher. We're going to start protesting more to get some justice. So there's some great stories that happen in Britain with black British folks, or even the whole migration of Jamaicans to Great Britain. That's a story. I mean, there's lots of great stories you could put in there, but I just think they don't think outside of the box. One of the things, coming back to my superhero nerd universe, I do have a character that kind of, he's older. He's an older character in my futuristic film, but I think maybe he's a younger character in my more 20th century film. And he's going to be called Lord Umbridge. He's a black superhero. I would say he's probably a little bit like Hancock's kind of I would say he's like a cross between Hancock and Deadpool. Very, very irreverent, kind of crazy, drinks a lot, but, does his job, the superhero, but just kind of, runs around the town, chases the women, does regular stuff. But yeah, he just happens to be black and he's British. But the people that he goes up against are also black and British, which I think would be a novel idea. And so, of course, the person I have in mind is, of course, Idris Elba. I think he play him in Chiwetel Ejiofor could be like the villain in it. And I think that'd be funny to have those two as.
Or, who else we could probably put in there too? Because people don't know that this man ain't even no African American either. Delroy Lindo, not African American.
That's true. Yeah, he's West Indian. So you got a bunch of West Indian. Cheryl Lee Ralph is West Indian. I thought she was Cheryl Lee Ralph is Jamaican. She's Jamaican.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's a lot of people that kind of keep floating out there. We've just thought all this time that they were African American, but oh no, they West Indian, or what's my other boys? Coleman Domingo. He's Dominican. He's Dominican.
Really?
Yeah. Coleman Domingo. He's Dominican, man.
I thought he was like from Florida or something like that.
No, he's Dominican. So we got all these folks that we think, we're just assuming that they're African American until they tell us their story. Like, when I was raised up on an island. Which island? Oh, I didn't tell you I'm from the Dominican Republic. You didn't know that? Oh no, I didn't know that. I thought you were from. No, I ain't from here. Or even like going back to Sydney. A lot of people know Sydney's from the Bahamas.
Harry Belafonte.
Harry Belafonte's folks from Jamaica. That's why he did the banana song so well, because he knew all those are work songs that they used in Jamaica.
Yep. And I just want to add this one last thing. So
Yeah.
what did we do together at Harris Stowe? Because we did something together where, somebody from who wants to go to college, we created a particular program together at Harris Stowe that people can learn about African Americans in film and such. What did we do together? Could you tell the audience?
What, developing the African Americans in film course? That one?
No, we did something else together. It was me, you, Dr. Reynaldo Anderson, and a few others. We did something.
You have to jog my memory on that one because we've been talking about so many things. Maybe I kind of shut the Harris Stowe things out for a second. Give me, throw me a line, throw me a hint on it.
It's a particular curriculum.
Oh,
I just
Africana
want
studies.
you to I just want you to tell the people what we did.
Oh yeah, depth man. Well, I guess maybe that's such a sore spot with me. Maybe I kind of suppressed it. But yeah, we definitely developed an Africana studies program of at least eight classes, ranging from everything from theater to film to psychology, philosophy, you just name it. And Kuhani was very instrumental, definitely one of our student consultants in developing it. It's still stalled for the most part, and that's a story for another broadcast.
We're not even going to talk about it.
Yeah, we're not. But we have had. I'll say it's been stalled, but yet it's going forward. And the reason why I say some of the classes have been stalled, but I would still say the most successful class that's come out of that has been the African Americans in film. That was a course that was blocked for years by administrators who I guess they didn't see the need for it, or maybe they said, oh, well, nobody needs that class, until we had a communication studies major. And we said, no, communication studies people need to see stuff like this. And I was excited for it. And then we had somebody teach Black women in music, Dr. Goddard Scoville. She did that one semester. And it was a packed class too. I mean, it was 30 people in the class.
I miss her so much.
And then last fall, the course that I created, Intro to Africana Studies, was taught, but it wasn't taught by me. It was taught by somebody else, and that's been a sore spot for me. But I'm glad at least the class got out into the universe. I would have preferred to have taught it because I had certain curriculum that I wanted to expose students to, and some of the great individuals like Malefi Asante and Darlene Clark Hines, and just a lot of other Black scholars out there that where else would they learn about these Black scholars unless they went to graduate school? But I really wanted to introduce them to just different theories of Blackness and parts of the African diaspora. I know it's still going to happen, and it's not only and I would not pigeonhole Harris Stowe. They're just, I just, like I said, I finished working with a friend of mine on a paper that there are a number of programs that are being downsized or being put on hold because they feel that they're not profitable for the university. And I guess anything they don't see, and there's this huge move towards STEM, everything being STEM. But my biggest issue with that is, how good is STEM without humanities? How good is STEM without the arts, or social sciences? It's not. It's devoid, because STEM in itself is very qualitative. No, quantitative. It's more quantitative. You're doing a lot of formulas, lot of theories and things like that. But then you come back to the arts, humanity, social sciences. You're dealing with more qualitative data, and you're having to deal with real people. So a lot of times with the sciences, you could go for months and months and not deal with a person. You could say, hey, I can dissect this frog, or I can do this thing with fruit flies, and you don't have to actually invoke a human being in this process. And nothing wrong with that, but it also separates you from a real human experience. Whereas that's why it's important that you have to have the humanities and the arts and social sciences in there, which puts us back in touch with who we are as individuals, so we don't become Dr. Frankensteins. And we're creating all these monsters out there devoid of philosophy and ethics and poetry and music and theater and things that kind of bring us back to our humanity. And so there are a lot of universities that are really shelving a lot of humanities programs. They're cutting back, or they're cutting budgets, or they're just overall getting. I mean, I think Lincoln University in Jefferson City got rid of its history program.
See, I've even read that universities get more money the more STEM programs they implement.
That's what it is. It's a money thing, but yet the STEM, the percentages of STEM graduates are much smaller than the humanities. And one of the articles that I came across, which I was very glad to, really talked about why it's important to have humanities in the midst. Do not get rid of the humanities, because without the humanities, let me find that quote. It's such a powerful quote. That without the humanities, where are we sending our students? What kind of world are we bringing our students into?
You know what's funny? There's people who claim that I don't know where they get this from, right? But there are some people who claim, because Paradigm Shift isn't the only social club, right? But there's other YouTube channels that claim that you have to use the scientific method, the actual scientific method, to really understand history. And I don't know what the hell, I don't know what they talk about, but it's weird, Uh-oh, you froze. Okay, I can hear you. Dr. Carr, where'd you go?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. 1 second, I gotta let my dog out. 1 second, I'll be right back.
Gotcha.
All right, we back in the house. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So, my dog just kept jumping on me like, I gotta go. I was like, oh yeah, okay. Yeah, because we had a little accident in the house the other day, quote unquote. And so she let me know, like, yeah, I'm trying to let you know I gotta go. So, okay, I can do it. Let's go. Yeah, this is what the quote says. It's very powerful. It says, despite the unfortunate trend of the downsizing of humanities programs, prominent leaders of higher education have argued that humanities are needed now more than ever for those pursuing professional education. Humanities, they argue, equip students to know what the right questions are, as well as how to resolve them within the broader context of human experience. Only humanities can do that. Not science, not STEM. STEM does not provide that foundation. STEM only wants quantitative. What are the numbers? What's the formula? What's the theory? And then there are bigger questions. What if we get to this point? What do we do ethically about what we've discovered? Oh, I don't know. I just theorized it. No. If you came up with this theory, how do we ethically apply it to the human experience? If you don't have those skills, you become Dr. Frankenstein.
Yeah.
And you start making your own, like, well, hey, let's just put some body parts together and hook up some electricity to it. Um, one thing I will say also in reference back to my superheroes, um, I was referring back to the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and I think the thing that makes the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen unique is that the characters are literary characters. The main characters are literary characters. Tom Sawyer, Captain Nemo.
Family
Um,
Quartermain.
yeah. All these they're kind of, as interesting. They're literary heroes, but they make them superheroes in a way, which I think is cool. So I am very much of the nature of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I said, what if I could come up with some really interesting Black literary characters from the 19th century, no doubt, from folk tales and legends, and put them together like the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. What could I do with that? So that's a piece I actually have already started developing right now called daguerreotypes, and I'll have more on that later. But it's evolving. But it had a lot to do with my experiences. I'm very fortunate. I was a park ranger for a year and a half. I worked as a park ranger. Yeah, that's something I always thought about, but I guess I can cross off my bucket list. It's not something I set out to do, but it's one of the most fulfilling work experiences of my entire life. It really is. It really was. Even though I had to work a lot on the weekends, just the knowledge I had to acquire with that, learning history, because I'm always interested in 19th century history as it relates to Black folks. Because we still are kind of in the dark, because we've only been told, during the 19th century, Black people were slaves. That's a lie. All Black people weren't enslaved. So that's why it's important for us to tell those stories, to show, like the African Company. Even though there's a play written about the African Company called African Company Presents Richard III. Who was that? Who said that? Who was that person?
This is a joint YouTube account that I have the keys to, and I guess this person thought that you was Professor Grant Carr to be on Roland Martin. So
Okay. I'm the other Grant Carr, y'all. I'm the other Grant Carr. There's two of us. I'm the other Grant Carr. I said once I finish my PhD work, I'm going to create a whole X account, no longer Twitter. I was gonna say the other Dr. Carr, the other Dr. Grant Carr.
You might have to put 3 R's at your last name.
Yeah. Because we teach similar subjects, and I did reach out to the other Greg Carr a couple of years back as we were developing our Africana Studies curriculum. I never heard back from him, so I ain't gonna say nothing else about that. I'm gonna let that go. But But we need to really start just mining all of these amazing stories. Both male and female, 19th century, 17th century. I want to go back to Nubia. I want to write a story about the first real Egyptians, the Black ones. Because I was watching Gods of Egypt last night. I almost threw up. I went, oh my gosh. Hollywood just goes out of its way to whitewash so many Black stories. That's okay. So you're gonna make Horus a white guy. I can't think of the name of the actor, but I know Gerard Butler played Set, and I went, for real? The guy in 300 is now going to be an Egyptian god. So he was Greek, but now he's going to be Egyptian. How does that work? No. But I think they did have Chadwick Boseman. The late Chadwick Boseman was one of the gods in there, but he just seemed awful effeminate in that movie. I was like, no. So that's why I think it's really important that we not only, or like the book of what was the movie Lakeith Stanfield was in. the book of something. It was like a parody.
Book of Clarence.
Yeah, the Book of Clarence. So we need stories like, even though I have not seen it, I need to see it. Is it on Netflix? Is it on showing on Netflix now?
I be using streaming websites.
I want to see it. I really do want to see it because I mean, how often do you see Black characters in antiquity that are, again, centered, not the, like in the original 10 Commandments with, Charlton Heston. You see some Black folks in it, but they don't say anything. They're just there for props. Even though the main characters of the 10 Commandments are all white, you still got some Black folks. So you are acknowledging they were Black Egyptians, but they don't have any lines.
Did you know?
Yeah.
You know that my favorite actor, Calvin Lockhart, he played one of them. What do you call them people that had them big feathers that'll wave over people in royalty back in the day?
The big palm frond fan.
Calvin Lockhart was playing one of them people in Cleopatra with Elizabeth Taylor. He's in there.
I believe it. It was probably a good paycheck too, but did he have any lines?
Nope.
No, he was like waving something with that big palm frond, just waving. This good servant, yeah. But those irk me. Those just irk me. Again, what we can also do, Kuhani, is I think there's a certain level of subversion that Black writers and directors can use. I think that Langston Hughes was very good at subverting stories. Many people don't realize that one of his most famous poems, I Too, was a protest poem. It was a response poem. It wasn't an original poem he just wrote. He wrote it in response to something. So you got, oh man, my brain's leaving me. So I get online and my brain leaves. Walt Whitman. Walt Whitman wrote one of these classic American poems called "I Hear America Singing," and he's doing he's shouting out the Italians, he's shouting out the Irish and the Scottish, and he shouts out everybody, and then at the end says "Thank you very much," and doesn't acknowledge a single Black person in it. And so Langston Hughes takes offense to this, and he says, "I too sing America. You forgot about me. I'm the darker brother. They tell me to go to the kitchen when the company comes, but I laugh, I eat well, I grow strong. Tomorrow, I won't be in the kitchen. I won't have to be in the kitchen when company comes, but they'll see how beautiful I am. I too am America." And I think he also wrote a response to Eugene O'Neill's Emperor Jones. I think called it Der Führer Jones. So we got Black people who are writing things, and I would also put Hollywood Shuffle in there as subversion, to critique Hollywood, bamboozle. Anything that takes up a weapon and critiques Hollywood for its racist policies or Broadway. So we need subversive stories, because sometimes through those subversive stories, we can get even not only a bigger picture, but we can also pull things. Like for example, Hollywood Shuffle is one of my favorite films. After he does Hollywood Shuffle, there is down towards the end, there is an image of Bobby, the character he plays, Bobby, imagining all the different characters he could play besides, sweet, the revenge. Oh, he shot me dead. He says, I could play a superhero. I could play Rambo. I could play all these different things. I think that one vignette in which you see him flying was the inspiration for Meteor Man. So you could actually pull so I think he took maybe that vignette and made it into a whole film. So there are ways we can do these things, but I think we also have to be courageous enough to be subversive, and I think that's what people are afraid of. And when you are subversive, when you do issues of race, you're going to make some people uncomfortable. People did not like Bamboozle. People were very uncomfortable with Bamboozle because, again, Spike Lee was saying out loud what white folks say behind closed doors in their country clubs and their dinner clubs and, the executive boardrooms and what have you. And when he said out loud, I mean, Siskel and Ebert hated it. They just, it's a bunch of racist trash. Well, good and well, you were raised on Amos and Andy. You saw the whole thing, but Spike just happened to put it out there. And he was very meticulous with it. He was very meticulous with putting it out there. So,
yeah, it's. I think I remember when I was at listening to the Cans interview that Ozzie Davis had with and Do the Right Thing. He said, me being, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said me being next to Spike Lee. Back in the day when I did Cotton Comes to Harlem.
Mm-hmm.
We and other actors in the 70s, black actors in the 70s, were trying to ask to be in the system. We were trying to ask to get into the door, but Spike Lee just kicked the door down.
Yeah.
And, on that note, we're at the 2:40 mark, almost at 3 hours.
Yeah.
And
it's been good, but time to go.
Yeah, it is. So peace, Paradigm Shift 314.
Peace,
I hope you
y'all.
all enjoyed this, because I did too. All right.
I did. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Thanks for inviting me, brother. I appreciate you, man.
Right on.
Right on, man.